Customer service is one of the most important endpoints of marketing, and yet my experience has been that many marketers get so focused on the product they're selling or the service that they're offering that they forget that what happens at the point of sale can matter more than anything else they actually do. So given that it's December and lots of people are out shopping in retail stores right now, let's talk about customer service. And when I think about that topic, there's one day in my life I'll never forget. This story is completely true, by the way, and it all happened in the spring of 2005. So there I was, sitting in a circle with a bunch of retail store managers, and every single one of them was glaring at me. What had I done to offend them, you might ask? Well, I was actually trying to help them. See, they were all my peers because at this point in my life, I was also a store manager working for a video game retailer called EB Games. And at this meeting, our district manager had asked each of us to share the secrets of our success. But there was a problem. Not everyone in that room was equally successful. And that well-meaning advice we were all supposed to share ignored the fact that out of well over 100 stores in our entire region, we in the district had both the top performer and the lowest performer sitting in the same room. And one of those people was far more in line with everyone else than the other. You might be able to see where this is going, or maybe you, like me that day, will be surprised at what actually happened. I'm Sean in St. Louis, and this is the Marketing Gateway. So let me see if I can take you back to that day about 20 years ago. Like I said, on this day in the spring of 2005, we were all sitting in a circle of a brand new EB Games store that we'd all just helped to set up in a strip mall in St. Louis. It was about a day or two away from actually opening up, and our district manager decided that since we were ahead of schedule, he was going to have us share some best practices with each other on how to run a store. Now, I should clarify here that EB Games isn't around anymore today, at least not in the United States. My district manager didn't know it at this point, but he was just months away from being one of the casualties of a soon-to-be-announced merger acquisition by our largest rival, GameStop. He was an old school guy, someone who'd been around nearly since the beginning, back when EB Games was still called Electronics Boutique. And he used to wear a tie and sell people computers in a store in the mall. He didn't really like video games, and every one of us was about half his age, but he did know management, and he knew sales, and he definitely knew that whether we were selling video games or sneakers or scented candles, our success all boiled down to one thing: having a good store manager in place who understood how to take care of customers. And that's why he asked us to share our secrets, because our district had a few old hands, but also a lot of newer managers who were still learning the ropes. And, like I mentioned, we'd had the greatest disparity of any district in the entire region between high performers and low performers. He was hoping that if we started talking, maybe things would even out. And so we talked. And the first manager said a few pretty normal things about how important it is to hire good staff and make sure that you can trust them when you're away. But then he launched into this tirade about the customers. From his point of view, customers came into a video game store for one of three reasons: to buy something, to steal something, or to waste your time. And his tips were all about how to make sure you can identify who's going to buy something so you can take care of them as quickly as possible, and then spend the rest of your time watching out for the people who want to steal and ignore the people who just want to hang around and chit-chat about video games. A lot of people in the circle nodded as he said all of this, and I wasn't surprised as much at what he was saying, but I was surprised that anyone would think it was wise. Did I mention that this person ran that lowest ranked store in the entire district? So then the next person spoke up, and she was, I have to say, one of the hardest working people I've ever known. And she desperately wanted to be at the top of those rankings. But something was holding her back, and I started to get a sense of what that might be as she said she agreed with the previous manager and provided a crash course for us all in loss prevention and preventing shrink, which are fancy retail terms for preventing theft, both from employees and from customers. Employee theft is something we all had to be vigilant about because it happens all the time in retail, but the customers were really limited in what they could just walk in and steal because most of the inventory was locked up behind the counter or in the stockroom. And there were rules about what we were allowed to do because accusing customers of theft is something that you can't do in retail unless you have solid proof that they've done it. And even then, if you look away for even a second, they can dump the goods you think they're trying to steal, and then you've got a false accusation that they can come back and sue you for. But this lady hated shrink so much that she'd practically eliminated it from her store. She was proud of it. So the tips she gave us were all about how to deter would-be thieves and how to trick them into losing their nerve and leaving the store without actually stealing anything. To be really successful at this, she told us, you just have to assume that everybody walking in your store is there to steal something. Again, heads were nodding. I was stunned by this point, thinking, how do these other managers have any actual customers if they're spending so much time worrying about everyone walking in the door trying to steal from them? And thankfully, the next manager who spoke up said he really wasn't as worried about his customers stealing from him as the last two managers were. And this manager, I have to say, was not only the most experienced of us in the room, aside from our district manager, but also a little bit more bookish than everyone else, almost professorial in his knowledge. I was ready to breathe a sigh of relief that maybe someone here had something a little less paranoid to share. So this guy started explaining that his biggest concern are the sorts of people we often see day in, day out in a video game store who tend to wander in and just want to hang around the store without actually buying anything. One of the groups of people that he really disliked were the parents who drop their kids off and treat the store like a free babysitter while they would go around and do other shopping. Unsupervised kids tended to hog the interactive game systems to fight over who got to play next, and they were just generally a nuisance. The next group of people this manager disliked were your stereotypical video gamers, usually young guys who lacked any social skills. They didn't always bathe very well, and they loved to just come in the store and yap about games. We all had kids and annoying customers in our store every day, so this wasn't news to any of us. But this manager then explained that he'd been studying some human psychology in his spare time, and he'd figured out a secret to dealing with these social misfits who could waste his time if he didn't figure out how to stop them. He said he'd tried being direct, he'd tried being polite, and he'd even tried being rude, but those things don't work because these people don't pick up on social cues. So he shared that he discovered human beings will taper off conversations naturally if you begin lowering the level of engagement with them by reducing the number of syllables in your response. If your first response has 7 syllables, you go down to 6, and then 5, and then 4, and then 3, and then 2, and then 1, and then eventually you just kind of start grunting softly. Eventually, he told us, this would cause those annoying customers to receive a subconscious cue that the conversation is over and to move on with their day. And best of all, he told us it's easy. You don't have to have a confrontation or risk upsetting them or even get upset yourself. You just decrease your attention and let them figure things out for themselves. Now, maybe you're hearing this and thinking, wow, that's a great tip. And obviously it's stuck with me too through all these years because it really is interesting and I believe a valid facet of human behavior. But I want you to notice something about this advice. It's the transactional nature of it. The assumption that if someone wants to come into your retail setting and talk about what you've got for sale, the only way to look at them is either as a prospect or a waste of time. To me, as a store manager sitting there listening to this notion was actually offensive. 2 decades later, as a parent who's seen other parents use the same technique to ignore what their own children have to say, it strikes me more as sad. Around the room we went. And with every manager, it was pretty much more of the same advice. Focus on the people who actually want to spend money and either distrust or get annoyed by anyone else. The secret to success is bringing in sales at the exclusion of all else. Don't waste your time talking to someone who isn't ready to buy today, and you'd sure as heck better make sure they don't walk out with more than they came in with unless they pull their wallet out first. Can you see why we had so many low-ranked stores in our district? So finally, it was my turn. And everyone was already annoyed because they all knew I was going to say something to challenge the status quo. I'd been a manager for about 2.5 years at this point. I was running the top-ranked store, not just in the district, but the entire Midwestern region. You'd think that this would have been a situation where people were interested in what I had to say and respectful of my point of view, but if you think that, you probably never worked in retail sales because the competitive nature of it makes everyone assume that if you're doing better than them, you either got there through dumb luck or by having a better location or by cheating your way to the top. And by the way, I was regularly accused of all 3 things. I cleared my throat. So I'm really interested in hearing what everyone here has to say, I started. I think you all know we do things a little differently at my store. We just try to make it a fun experience for every customer every time. I know I'm far from the only game in town. There are at least 5 other stores just like mine within as many miles. People shop at my store because they want to, not because they have to. So my perspective is that anyone who walks into the store is a customer, I continued. They might not be buying anything today, but that doesn't mean they won't come back later. A lot of times they do come back. So what I try to do is make sure that whenever they come inside, they're having the best possible experience that I can offer. I say hello when they come in. I ask them what they're excited about, and I just try to get them to open up, and I talk a little bit about whatever interests them. I've made a rule that we're not allowed to say things like, "May I help you?" or "What brings you in today?" because those just lead to a yes or a no. We've asked open-ended questions like, "How's traffic?" or "What's the weather like?" or "How's the Cardinals game going?" so we can get over the initial awkwardness and actually talk. And if they just want to look around, I tell them where to find me and what I'm up to, and that it's okay to interrupt me, and then I let them be. When they leave, I remind them they can bring in games to trade next time, and I always tell them thanks, and I hope to see them again so they'll know they're welcome to come back whether they buy anything or not. So far, so good. Heads are nodding. I'm speaking quickly because I'm nervous, so I pause and try to breathe because I know the next part is going to be more controversial. We get a lot of kids in the store, I went on. We're right next to Target, and moms love to drop their kids off with us. And so I'll talk to the kids and find out what they're into, and I'll even encourage them to play on the interactives. And we do free tournaments every Saturday night and costume parties on Halloween. And I tell the kids to come back and join us for those. I tell them about the games that are coming up that they should be excited about. And when their moms come and collect them, I tell their moms their kids are always welcome because we do tournaments and events all the time, and their kids can trade in their old games and get credit for new ones. And you'd be surprised how many of them do come back and tell me that they won't go anywhere else. Around the room, heads were nodding a little bit less now, but nobody was offended yet. So I was hopeful that the next part would land too. See, what I'm hearing from a lot of you is that your customers only really matter to you if they're going to buy something, I said. But my experience is that most of the people who come into my store are just killing time. They aren't coming in to buy anything, and I'm not going to convince them to spend a lot even if I push really hard with a sales pitch. I might be able to get them to buy a cheap game or a magazine or something, but I don't want them to come in to do that. I want them to come back when they're ready to buy something big. And that means that I've got to make sure that every single time they come in, whether they're buying anything or not, I'm making sure that they're having fun. Because remember, it's a video game store. It's supposed to be fun. That's what we're selling, and that's what we have to provide. One of the other managers interrupted me. "How many hours a week are you working?" he asked. "Well, I put in my full 45, I said, and everyone knew what that meant. 5 days of 9-hour shifts, our standard workload as salaried managers. But, I stay late on Saturdays and run the events, and I'll work longer if it's a big release day or we got a big sale going on. And I also write an email newsletter I send out once a week with all of our sales and promotions and events. And, I'm out there trying to work out relationships with other businesses so we can promote each other. And, of course, I spend my days off playing games so I can have something to talk about when I'm working again." "So you basically live in your store," someone else challenged me. "You have no life outside of what you're doing." "Yeah, you're basically telling us to spend all our free time working," said someone else. "Did you ever consider that maybe you're just lucky?" another manager said. "Like maybe all this stuff you're doing is just working now, but it's not going to work in a few years from now when everybody gets tired of it, is it?" "And it seems to me like having all these people in your store means you're going to have a lot more stuff get stolen," said the manager who gave us all the tips about stopping thieves. "How are you watching that?" It went on like that. And I could feel the anger and resentment around the room welling up inside my colleagues. And my district manager, who should have stepped in and told people to listen what I had to say, because it was in his own self-interest for us all to do well, instead started saying his same old spiel about how important it was for us to be making sales and pushing product on people. And it was a thing we heard every week. We all knew his old ideas about how to sell computers to people didn't work for video games. Video gamers don't like to be pushed to try new things that already exist. They like to be hyped up about things they don't yet have. That's just how they think. And my message got lost as well. None of these managers took anything I said to heart. By the end of the year, a few of them were fired for poor performance, and a couple of others were let go when they got caught stealing. There's another sad casualty in all of this as well. As EB Games got swallowed up by its biggest rival in our merger with GameStop, we lost this amazing motto that had guided the organization since its early days. It's so simple, it's still seared into my brain, and that statement is this: it's all about the customer. As a store manager, I lived it every day, and as a result, my store continued to be the top-ranked store in the region, even when our merger with GameStop doubled that region's size and put me in an even more competitive situation. And what did I attribute to that success? The experience my team and I provided to our customers, because I'd learned by this point that it wasn't just me or my staff or my location or even all the hard work I'd been putting in that made my store so successful. It was the fact that day in and day out, we had customers walking in the door who wanted to be in this particular store and who wanted to buy their video games from us. But my ego didn't swell because it wasn't about me. It never was and never has been since. It was all about the customer. I'm Sean in St. Louis, and this has been the Marketing Gateway. See you next time. Today's plug is for our retail employees, the unsung heroes of the holiday season. My wife and I both used to work in retail, and in fact, we met working the holiday season together at a retail store. That time of our lives not only gave us some serious PTSD for events like Black Friday and Christmas Eve, but also a lot of appreciation for retail workers. And ever since COVID, retail has been a pretty miserable job. Stores looking to cut back on costs always trim service first. And the result is long lines, empty shelves, and employees who are overworked, stressed out, and extremely tired of being kicked around by impatient or nasty customers. So let me encourage you when you're shopping this month. Thank the retail workers you encounter, not just for ringing you out, but for being there. Shoot them a smile, tell them a joke, let them know you see them as people who are doing their best. And if you need to talk to the manager, tell them what's going right in their store before you complain about what's wrong. Trust me when I say that those retail workers can use those kind words this month more than ever. And you might find it puts you in a better mood as well.